Audio Jungle.
Good day and welcome to Tech News. My name is Adrio Kirewi. First, the headlines. Bugatti showcased its first electric scooter. Tesla in 13 countries could be remotely operated without the owner's knowledge, as tweeted by a German teenager. Indonesian student becomes a millionaire selling selfies as NFTs on OpenSea marketplace. Mars has some Earth-like weather, but no rainbows, said NASA scientist. Plus, Singapore Central Bank issues guidelines to discourage crypto trading by public. Details shortly after the break. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now the news in detail. Bugatti, the French car manufacturer that is renowned throughout the world for manufacturing super sports cars of innovative technology, unveiled its first electric scooter, e-scooter, capable to run at the top speed of up to 30 kilometers per hour. Bugatti has developed first of its kind e-scooter after collaboration with the American company Bitech International. New e-scooter from Bugatti that runs entirely on electricity is equipped with a 700-watt electric motor. E-scooter rider can accelerate up to 30 km per hour and charge the complete electric battery within 4 hours from any available public charging outlet, including household. The body of the electric scooter is made up of magnesium alloy and weighs only 15.8 kilograms. Bugatti e-scooter commuter not only can use an onboard computer, but can also turn on LED headlights at the night or inside the tunnel, and also use parking lights while parking e-scooter in public parking spaces. Recently, 19-year-old German teenager named David Colombo, IT security specialist, owner of startup company Colombo Technology, claimed through its Twitter account that it is now possible for him to remotely operate 25+ Tesla electric cars, e-cars, in 13 countries without the owner's knowledge. IT security specialist further tweeted about how he could disable Sentry Mode, open doors or windows, and access keyless driving from his location. Initially, he tried to reach out to Tesla but couldn't do that. Then he spread his message through the social media platform Twitter. When broadcasters from Bloomberg contacted him for proof, he declined to share the facts and said that disclosing evidence at the moment could be leaked, and this will pose a serious security threat that could be hacked by hackers, so he would only reveal the Tesla vulnerabilities to the company's representatives. In the last 1 year, several elements of the crypto space have witnessed a boom in adoption, and one of these are digital collectibles called non-fungible tokens, NFTs. Sultan Gustav Al-Ghazali, a 22-year-old Indonesian college student, has made the most of it, churning out over $1 million by selling NFTs. The computer science student from Semarang, Indonesia, converted nearly 1,000 of his selfies taken over the course of 5 years into NFTs and sold them on OpenSea marketplace. Welcome back. We apologize for the break in transmission. In a bid to be able to revisit his college days later, Ghazali had taken a rather expressionless selfies sitting or standing in front of his computer each day between the ages of 18 and 22. He turned these images into NFTs and put them on OpenSea for sale, pricing each at $3. Ghazali's NFT collection reached a total trade volume of 317 Ethereum, or $1,041,325, making him a millionaire overnight. NASA scientist Mark Lemon, while explaining the reasons for no rainbows on planet Mars, said that clouds made of water are present in a thin atmosphere of planet Earth, and many of us saw the image taken from Perseverance rover with an arc across the sky, but it was not a rainbow, but a lens flare. Lens flare usually has been seen even in brightly lit laboratory images, so pointing out towards rainbow clarifies that rainbows needed more water so that they could reflect like a substance. Rainbows would require a lot of water, and unfortunately, Mars has no sufficient water. Although there exist clouds in the atmosphere of Mars, but it lacks dry carbon dioxide, unlike Earth. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, on Monday issued guidelines that limit cryptocurrency trading service providers from promoting their services to the general public as part of a bid to shield retail investors from potential risk. Singapore is a popular location for cryptocurrency companies due to a comparatively clear regulatory and operating environment, and is among the forerunners globally in developing a formal licensing framework. But the city's state authorities have repeatedly warned that trading in digital payment tokens, DPT, or cryptocurrency is highly risky and not suitable for the general public, as they are subject to sharp speculative swings. They can only market or advertise on their own corporate website, mobile applications, or official social media accounts. And that's all for now on Tech News. Till we meet again, my name is Adria Fury. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to Paul's Tech News. January is halfway over, and I still can't tell what kind of a year 2022 is going to be. I mean, we still have horrible things from prior years carrying over, as reflected in this week's news stories. Nvidia taunting us with ever more expensive and unattainable GPUs. CES attendees discovering that the whole stays in Vegas thing does not apply to COVID. And GTA 6, which could provide us all with a blessed escape from this cruel reality, is still likely 2 years off, if we're lucky. On the plus side though, there is hope for an easing of the shortages later in the year. New chip fabs seem to be popping up everywhere, and Razer got called out on the BS marketing they've been doing for their RGB face mask. And perhaps most importantly, you're here, right now, watching this show, presumably because there's no possible better way you could be spending your time. But I think as a result, you're going to end up smarter, and a bunch of other good things are going to happen too, and I also might occasionally make a joke. Not right now, though.
Excellent!
We begin this week with Nvidia, who tried to pull a fast one on us all with Tuesday's launch of the RTX 3080 12GB, a slightly upgraded RTX 3080 with 2 more gigs of VRAM, a handful of extra CUDA cores, and a bit more memory bandwidth. It also bumps the power up to 350 watts, but there were precious few media reviews at launch. Those who did discuss it seemed a bit miffed too, and the reasons why were best articulated by Angry Steve over at Hardware Unboxed. You see, it all goes back to the September 2020 launch of the original RTX 3080, which had an MSRP of $700, which was fantastic. It was well received by the press, and it was clear that Nvidia was comfortable selling the GA102 GPU-based card for that much money. Shortly thereafter, though, GPU mining profitability spiked, card supply dried up, and we've seen a shortage situation ever since, with 10 gig 3080s regularly selling for $2,000 or more. Nvidia probably greatly regrets that $700 list price though, as it's frequently been used as a metric to compare GPU value before and after the outsized influence of cryptocurrency mining. And Nvidia has been seeking ways to leverage the shortage situation and sell their GA102 GPUs for more money ever since. It started with the RTX 3080 Ti, which listed for $1,200, even though it was only about 11% faster. And while it's certainly legitimate to argue that they're a business doing what businesses do and selling their product for what the market will bear, they've taken things a step further with the RTX 3080 12GB. The top 2 grievances are that there's no stated MSRP for the new version, and that Nvidia withheld pre-launch drivers from the few reviewers who did have cards, in an apparent attempt to soften the launch day criticism, which they would have preferred went by with as little fanfare as possible, so the replacement RTX 3080, which we can now see is listing on EVGA's store for $1,250 to $1,300, could sell out immediately to scalpers with minimal finger pointing as to who is now profiting most from the shortage. You'd have to assume that even an undisclosed official MSRP would be less than the $1,200 that the 3080 Ti lists for, but since 12 gig 3080s are already selling for more than that, they've even been hemmed in by that GPU's MSRP, which launched last June. So we get it. There's no Founders Edition, no official MSRP, and likely very few, if any, GA102 dies that Samsung's fabs produce will now go into 10 gig 3080s. They'll go into 12 gig ones that cost a lot more. Reviews are now in, and big surprise, Nvidia managed to ration the card's resources just enough to slot performance in beneath the 3080 Ti and above the OG 3080, even though it was just a 10% gap between those two cards already, which is another reason why this card was not needed by anyone except Nvidia, who wanted to correct their original pricing mistake. Angry Steve was right to be angry. But what can any of us actually do about it? The frustrating answer is not much. We could gloat over rumors that surfaced Friday about troubles with the upcoming 3090 Ti, which was supposedly going to launch on the 27th, but has now had its embargo canceled, while AIB partners were ordered to halt production, as reported by TweetTown and confirmed by videocards.com. Issues with the BIOS and hardware, it said. Gloating probably won't do us much good though, but don't buy into the argument that Nvidia should be doing this because the money would have just gone to scalpers anyway. That helps anchor these prices so they remain high even after the shortage subsides. I think the thing we really need though is patience and hope for another market shift like what happened after the last GPU bubble popped in 2018. Countless used GPUs flooding the market for well below MSRP, which I will happily recommend to new builders over whatever the latest newly launched card is if that happens again in the near future. Speaking of hopium-based fantasy scenarios, Nvidia also says that GPU shortages will ease in the second half of 2022? Perhaps I judged them too harshly. As reported by Seeking Alpha, Colette Kress, Chief Financial Officer of Nvidia, spoke at the 24th Annual Needham Growth Conference and said, "Throughout all of calendar 2021, we have seen strong demand for GeForce, and it continues to remain stronger than our overall supply. We feel better about our supply situation as we move into the second half of the calendar year 2022. That would seem to indicate that Team Green has plans to ramp up output for the GeForce RTX 40 series, codenamed Ada Lovelace, which is expected to be manufactured on TSMC's N5 node, which already has a good 3-year track record." And one more bit of Nvidia news, more specifically an update on the Nvidia-based EVGA GPUs that were stolen en route from San Francisco to Southern California back in October. They have been found, and are now safely being sold in Vietnam by the Cong Nguyen PC store, Ho Chi Minh City branch, at least according to a Facebook post from a store customer whose 3080 Ti couldn't be registered with EVGA since it was on the ban list from last year's robbery. It was at least discounted though and sold with a limited 1-month warranty, so we'll see if EVGA's APAC team follows up with the store and if there's any more to this story. And hey, at least they didn't all just end up in a mining farm. Let's quickly dip into some AMD news next. After the Zen 4 CES announcements, it was inevitable that the chips would start to appear in the wild. But this was pretty quick. 2 engineering sample CPUs popped up in the public database of the Milky Way at Home project early this week, which appear to be Zen 4-based early Ryzen 7000 series samples. One was an 8-core and one was 16-core, and they have 1024 kilobytes of L2 cache per core, double what Zen 3-based Ryzen 5000X CPUs currently ship with. Because the CPUs were paired with an RTX 2080, TechSpot assumes the entries came from an OEM rather than AMD themselves, and there's not much info beyond that. Expect more leaks like this as 2022 progresses though, since Zen 4 Ryzen 7000 CPUs are expected in the second half of the year, along with the new socket LGA 1718 AM5 platform. And let's round out the main part of the show with a handful of stories about Intel, starting with a leak about their upcoming Raptor Lake CPUs, the follow-up to Alder Lake expected later this year. At CES, Intel showed an early sample of Raptor Lake running Windows, and so it makes sense that the Intel boot log already has entries for the new CPUs. Specs listed show a 24-core, 32-thread CPU, which is presumed to be an i9-13900K with 16 efficiency cores and 8 performance cores, doubling the E-core count versus the 12900K. This aligns with a leak from early December that showed the same configuration, although it was an early sample just running at 1.8 GHz, which is a bit slow for an Intel CPU. It does look like they're doubling down on those E-cores though, which you might think is a Raptor Lake mistake. But while you were staring at those P-cores, they just stared right back. And that's when the attack comes. Not from the front, but from the sides. And the other Raptor E-cores that you didn't even know were there. Clever girl. Joe, can we just make a note that I was the first to make a clever girl joke about Raptor Lake, and anyone who does it after now is just copying me? Thanks. Der Bauer, famed PC overclocker, tech YouTuber, and answer to the question, where Bauer got his hands on what appears to be an unreleased 56-core Intel Xeon processor, an engineering sample from the Sapphire Rapids line that's not expected until later in 2022. He picked it up on eBay and proceeded to do what he does best, delidding the socket 4677 CPU to reveal what was beneath the heat spreader, which was simply labeled Xeon vPro XCC QWP3. The answer was 4 compute dies, which were connected via Intel's Embedded Multi-Die Interconnect Bridge, or EMIB technology, which totally doesn't use glue like AMD's Infinity Fabric probably does. Roman would have loved to fire up the CPU rather than destroying it to see its innards, but apparently the CPUs are much easier to come by right now than the LGA 4677 motherboards, which you kind of need in order to run the CPU. Intel had some internal changes going on this week as well, with client computing group lead Gregory G.B. Bryant announcing that he would be leaving the company for another opportunity, hot on the heels of his CES 2022 keynote presentation. I will say this though, if you're going to leave a company, the beginning of the year is the classy time to do so, after handling the mess that usually accompanies the holiday season and Q4. Intel's new CCG head and woman who really doesn't have time for your shit today, Michelle Johnston Holthouse, has not indicated if she will also use an amicable acronym in place of her given name, as MJH doesn't really roll off the tongue quite the same way, but she has a long and proven track record at Intel, joining Team Blue 25 years ago in 1996. She will also be joined by a new social media head as well, Leslie Douglas, as reported by Dr. Ian Cutress, and Leslie has already proved her social media acumen by including both emojis and a hashtag in her announcement post. Hopefully she can convince CEO Pat Gelsinger to do a TikTok dance next and really win over those youth demographics. Digitimes reported Thursday that TSMC has updated their 3nm fab plans, promising Intel additional manufacturing capacity by repurposing an R&D facility in northern Taiwan to be another N3 fab just for Intel. This will allow them to separate Intel's orders from Apple's, keeping information regarding products from each manufacturer secure from the other. This is both an indication of Intel's expanding plans for chip production in coming years, as well as their willingness to enter a long-term partnership with TSMC, who is technically a rival in terms of chip production. TSMC's cutting-edge fabs have proven very successful though, which is why they are outperforming their growth targets and planning further expansion in 2022. Intel also has expansion plans though, and we are apparently on the cusp of an official announcement that should make Ohio residents happy. The location has been chosen for a $20 billion facility that will employ 3,000 people in the greater Columbus area. Rumors have been swirling about this one for a while, and most recently, the city of New Albany annexed 3,190 acres from neighboring Jersey Township to expand the New Albany International Business Park, where Google, Amazon, and Facebook have data centers. Seems like a spot where an Intel factory could fit right in. Plus, it's in Licking County, which is way better than Sucking County, and semiconductor wafers are supposed to be very flat, just like Ohio, so this all makes a lot of sense to me. What doesn't make sense is tech briefs. How can they be so packed with information and fun while also being so brief? We'll probably never know. PCI-SIG, the governing body for PCI Express, is packing in more data than ever with their first release of the PCI Express 6.0 standard. 64 gigatransfers per second per lane for a maximum theoretical bandwidth of 256 gigabytes per second in a 4x16 slot. 256 gigabytes per second. That's like this whole SSD, or roughly 4% of your hidden porn collection, going from here to there in 1 second. This will mostly help data centers and stuff, but it just really blows the mind. I can't even think that fast. Razer had to think fast when they got called out by Naomi Wu just after CES, where Razer's new Zephyr Pro RGB face mask won some awards and attention. Wu, aka Real Sexy Cyborg on Twitter, pointed out that the mask is not N95 rated. Only the filters appear to meet the particulate standards, and since N95 is an official certification granted by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, Razer was misleading people with the term N95 grade. After complaints gained traction, Razer removed all references to N95 grade filter from their marketing materials and emailed buyers to let them know that the Zephyr is not a certified N95 mask. Thanks to Naomi for calling this out, and she also suggested showing this video where she originally tried out the Razer Zephyr back in November and used her engineering skills to build a much more functional version. This video is linked in the video's description. Samsung mysteriously no-showed to their own event, an Exynos 2200 launch announcement that they teased at the end of December, which was expected to take place on Tuesday. The day came and went with nothing from Samsung, which is just a bit odd for a manufacturer of their size. A day later, though, Samsung decided to stop ghosting the world and told Business Korea, "We are planning to unveil the new application processor at the time of launching a new Samsung smartphone," which is probably the Galaxy S22, which will probably get announced at the Samsung Galaxy Unpacked 2022 event, which will probably be in early February. Or maybe there's some trouble causing a delay with Samsung's new flagship. That's completely unsubstantiated information, but maybe. Also unrelated, about 70 CES 2022 attendees from South Korea brought COVID-19 home from the show and had to be quarantined. That includes executives and staff from major South Korean companies, 20 reportedly from Samsung, and I'm sure none of them were the ones who were supposed to give that Exynos 2200 announcement. I didn't even say that out loud, so I'm not sure why you're thinking it. You should stop it. Stop that now. Speaking of stopping things, police are theoretically supposed to stop crime, but not in this hilarious story about cops who would rather hunt Pokemon than pursue criminals while on the beat. The goofy officers were recorded in 2017 hunting an errant Snorlax in Pokemon Go when one of those pesky robbery in progress calls came through. "Ah, screw it," they said, and continued to drive their police cruiser around collecting digital cartoon characters. Just adorable. Speaking of video games and cops, GTA 6 will probably feature both of those things if it ever launches, and while some have given up hope on the series due to recent missteps made by Rockstar, there is now hope that the game might actually launch in the next 2 years, if financial estimates made by parent company Take-Two are any indication. They're expecting strong growth through 2024, optimistically enough that analysts say only a GTA release could make them so confident in their money-making abilities in that time frame. And the good news is they're talking about fiscal years, meaning that if true, the actual launch could be anywhere from the beginning of April 2023 to the end of March 2024. April 2023 is only about 15 months away. All they need to do now is promise a PC launch at the same time as the consoles, and it might be enough to make us forget how dirty they did us all with the whole GTA, the trilogy, the definitive edition remastered thing. Some wounds will never fully heal though. So there you have it guys, tech news for the week, and I hope y'all are having a great start to 2022 so far. Your feedback is always welcome, so please feel free to leave me a comment down below. While you're down there, all the articles I talked about today are linked in the description if you're interested in further reading. You can also click the like button. If you enjoyed this video, check out my store at paulshardware.net for a selection of excellent merchandise options, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and more, and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos like this one in the future. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Audio Jungle.
All know Mitch served as the 61st mayor of New Orleans. Under his leadership, New Orleans is widely recognized as one of the nation's greatest comeback stories, recovering from Hurricane Katrina and the BP oil spill. Mitch served as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, was named Public Official of the Year in 2015, and was voted America's top turnaround mayor in a survey of mayors in 2016. Prior to serving as mayor, he served 2 terms as lieutenant governor of Louisiana and in the Louisiana House of Representatives for 16 years. As the president's infrastructure coordinator, Mitch oversees the largest long-term investment in America's infrastructure and competitiveness in nearly a century. I wanted to have him come speak with all of you following our announcement on Friday of more than $27 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law to fix an estimated 15,000 bridges across the country, and ahead of the president's meeting later this week with the Infrastructure Implementation Task Force, which he co-chairs. With that, I will turn it over. He's agreed to take a few questions before he has to go build some more bridges. I worked on that all day. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. So this is what this room looks like. I've been wondering for a while. It's nice to see you. Happy New Year to you. My name is Mitch. The president asked me to help him build a better America. I said yes. I hope the people of America agree to, because it's going to take all of us to get this done. When President Biden came into office just 1 year ago, he pledged to use the power of the presidency to help everyday Americans, to bring people together, and to rebuild our country. For decades, we just talked about Infrastructure Week, but President Biden reached across the aisle and in a bipartisan way actually got it done. Promises made, promises kept. Let me tell you, every week now is going to be Infrastructure Week, except the difference is we're actually going to build stuff. With the bipartisan infrastructure law, President Biden is delivering the largest investment in infrastructure in a generation. That means in most of our lives. A little more than 60 days ago, our team hit the ground running to deliver results. We have now convened the task force made up of cabinet members a total of 6 times. This Thursday will be our 7th, and the president will be with us. We're discussing hard questions, seeking to flesh out the tough stuff first. I'm a firm believer in running to the fire, not away from it. We're breaking down silos across agencies, on guidelines, on permitting, on hiring. This is a one team, one fight mission, and we're going to operate in that way. We also need good partners. The fact of the matter is that most of the building will actually be done by the states, by the cities, by the counties, by the tribal leaders. That's why our team, and me personally, have been reaching out, extensive outreach to state and local officials. At this point, we have reached out to all 50 governors and their key staff. I have spoken to hundreds of elected officials, and we have gotten a fantastic response from them all. As you know by now, we have asked states to appoint infrastructure coordinators, which we think will help foster cross-agency collaboration and make it easier for them to get problems solved very quickly. Already, states like Delaware and New Mexico have appointed coordinators, and states like Arkansas and Michigan are setting up interagency task forces. Our team is here to be problem solvers, to deliver, to build a team, and to help tell the story. Ultimately, we want to help people take advantage of this great opportunity to build a better America. Now, as a country, we haven't spent this amount of money on infrastructure in generations. So we're talking about how to do it with accountability and transparency, on time, on task, on budget, spending taxpayer dollars both wisely and well. Earlier today, I convened the inspectors general of federal agencies involved in the implementation of the law, letting them know we want to do this in a partnership, just like the president did when he was the vice president. He led the Recovery Act process, as the president has expected from his team since day one, including the implementation of ARP. As the president has made clear, results and accountability go hand in hand. To deliver results now and in the years to come, the federal government must undertake this work in a manner that is deserving of the public's trust. So we're going to lean forward. Stewardship of public dollars is a high priority. But I want to level set. This infrastructure work in general is not a one-time economic stimulus. It is not a race to see how many ribbons we can cut before the end of the year. Doing this is going to require balance. It's going to require order. We are definitely going to go fast, but we are not going to hurry, and we are going to get it right. On the nuts and bolts, we're on the right track. As the president laid out last week, we've made real progress. You've seen the announcements, rebuilding roads, ports, and airports. We're making progress on delivering high-speed internet to every American. We're making progress on ensuring water systems deliver clean water by replacing lead pipes. And of course, on Friday, the president rolled out the massive $27 billion allocation to states to fix over 15,000 bridges, the largest bridge program in American history. You see, bridges connect us. They connect people, the movement of goods. They connect communities. They connect the country. With this investment, President Biden is creating a bridge to the future, a pathway to win, a pathway for all of us to win. And today, we have another great announcement. The Department of Interior is announcing a new interagency program for cleaning up orphaned wells, a key initiative of the bipartisan infrastructure law. The law includes $4.7 billion to clean up orphan well sites, plugging, remediation, and restoration activities. So what does this mean for the people of America? Millions of us, millions, live within a mile of hundreds of thousands of orphaned and abandoned wells that leak and spew. These wells jeopardize public health and safety by contaminating groundwater, seeping toxic chemicals, emitting harmful pollutants, including methane. This well capping program also creates jobs and will revitalize rural economies in places where people are directly affected by a transitioning economy. And like so many of these issues we face, cleaning it up will take an all-of-government approach. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland is leading this effort in close partnership with the Department of Agriculture, EPA, and the Department of Energy, and already 26 states have asked for fundings to take advantage of this opportunity to clean up this mess. Secretary Haaland told me the other day a story about a school she visited where children had tissues in their nostrils due to constant nosebleeds, a result of contamination. Can you imagine having our children have to learn in this kind of environment? It has gone on for quite a long time. That's why we're doing this, real results where people live and where it really matters. Cleaning up communities, fighting climate change, creating new and better jobs, and building a bridge to a future economy. It's a really consequential effort. And later this week, there will be more announcements to come. In closing, let me just say, the president has been clear in his charge to me. Build a better America without unnecessary bureaucracy and delay, while at the same time doing what is difficult for the sake of what is right. And so better, as we have said many times, means creating good middle-class jobs, investing in American manufacturing and building capacity right here at home, supporting disadvantaged and underserved communities so that no one and no community is left behind, advancing climate resilience and sustainability so that we can be better prepared and ready for whatever is coming our way. All of this will make us stronger and better, reduce costs for the middle-class families, and help us compete. This is what building a better America looks like for all of us. Thank you. Jen, back to you.
All right. Jeff, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I was wondering if you could tell us what the response from some states in your old neck of the woods has been. So we've seen many federal programs, Obamacare one example, other things. Some red state governors have been resistant. Are you seeing a different kind of response on things like infrastructure, which the programs of which are popular, but the administration isn't necessarily? And just give us a time frame of when you think some of these ribbon cuttings, I know that's not the metric, but when will they be happening? Anything this year?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for that. A very wise person said, you know, even if they vote no, they want the dough. And that's absolutely true, especially on infrastructure. As I said, I have personally spoke to over 40 governors, 3 that chiefs of staff, the others we have been contacted through staff. I've talked to a number of Republican governors, all of whom in the reddest of red states were very welcoming. They were very appreciative that the president had asked to call. We clearly acknowledged with each other that we may have differences of opinion on other issues, but on building roads and bridges and airs and airports and clean water and broadband, you know, 75% to 80% of the people of America want these things to happen, and the governors have committed to work with us to actually get it done. You mentioned that in my neck of the woods. I'm from the state of Louisiana, as you know. We have gotten beaten to death by Katrina, Rita, Ike, Gustav, the national recession, the BP oil spill, and a bucket load of other stuff. We always wonder when the locusts are coming. And we have had interaction, as I was lieutenant governor, with a Republican governor who I served with and a Democratic governor. In both of those instances, bipartisanship really is at the forefront of these initiatives. There are going to be some differences, but at the end of the day, there really is common ground, and I feel very good about the willingness to lean forward and to do the things that all of our constituents need, irrespective of what party that they're in. In terms of turning dirt quickly, as I said to you, to level set with everybody in this room, because you will ask me about this from time to time, can you hurry up? When's the money going to get it to the ground? When are the first ribbon cuttings? First of all, this is very different from the American Recovery Program. This is a long-term investment in rebuilding America better. And so there are a lot of these programs that are actually new. Many of them are not. This happens in 2 ways. Some of this is through formula funding that has been set. Every governor has received an indication of what the states are going to receive for the next 5 years, and that's across whoever's sitting in the governor's chair, so they can start planning today and actually start breaking ground as soon as they're ready to do that. The other part of this bill is competitive grants. Some of those are going to take a little bit of time to set up. My expectation is there's some projects that you'll see people turning dirt on indefinitely the spring or the fall. Which ones they are, I can't actually point to you right now, but there's no reason why that shouldn't happen, especially if some of the projects have been in the line for some period of time.
Mary? To that point, you know, the president promised shovel-ready projects. The administration hasn't yet been able to identify which of those projects might be getting underway soon. When will we get a better sense of what projects are coming?
I can't give you an exact date, but as I said to you, with the announcements that have happened in the first 60 days, and you have a list of what those announcements are, I don't need to repeat them, but you remember the investments that we made in ports and the investment that we just made in bridges and the ones that we sent out, the ones that Michael Regan sent out on clean water and clean air. The governors now have this money. On top of that, some of this money is fungible from the American Recovery Plan as well. So as soon as the governors and the legislatures decide where this money is going to go, and they do it with appropriate attention to equity, climate, using American products and other things of that nature, those projects shouldn't take long. However, it takes a long time to build a bridge. You know, you don't build a bridge in a day. Now, sometimes people in this town know that you can tear down things a lot quicker than you can build them, and they work hard to do that. In this instance, we're going to take time and do it right, but we're going to do it as quickly as we possibly can.
Julie?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm curious about the $66 billion for Amtrak. What is the process looking like in terms of spending those funds? Again, on the timeline, when do you think that those dollars will get out? And is it going to be, in terms of figuring out which projects, I know they have planning that Amtrak does, and a lot of it's focused on that Northeast corridor that travels up the Northeast coast. Is that going to be a process that Amtrak itself figures out what they're going to spend, or is there going to be input also from the administration, the White House? How does that kind of work?
Well, first of all, we're going to all figure it out together. Yeah. You can count on that. Secondly, just to make you aware of the scope of this project, it's $1.2 trillion. There are 14 agencies plus some that have some level of involvement. In many of these plans and programs, it takes 3 or 4 agencies to coordinate. And then there are some independent agencies, and Amtrak is one of those. As you noticed, they have $66 billion to do a really, really big job. And of course, you won't be surprised to know the president has a special interest in trains. And he will talk to you about it for a very, very long time, and he knows more about it than many engineers in an unbelievable way. We've started those conversations with Amtrak. You have rightly noted that the Northeastern Corridor is the one that needs immediate attention. The president, however, has also indicated that he's really interested in trying to make sure that we look at where the connections are that connect moving people that's cheaper, faster, and is also climate friendly. So we're in the process of kind of putting that together, and we'll have a plan in the not too distant future.
Is that something that it could be started this year, or more likely something?
I think a lot, again, I don't want to speak specifically for Amtrak. It's an independent agency. There are many things that can be started right now. And as I have said to you, in some of these models that we have, in some formulas, that money has actually already been indicated and sent out of the door. So that's just going to be a matter of administrative work that we have to do.
Nancy's going
Sure.
to have to be the last one. Go
Hey,
ahead.
Nancy.
Thanks, Mitch. Based on what you've seen so far, how many state governments have the capacity already to evaluate this huge number of projects all at once and determine which ones are most worthy of the funding? Because as we saw, for
Right.
example, with the American Rescue Plan, you might be very organized here at the federal level, but if they don't have the staffing and the know-how and the capacity at the state level, there will be bottlenecks.
Great, that is a fantastic question, and thank you for asking us. As you heard me say throughout this talk, it's all going to be about balance. How do you go fast and how do you get it right? How do you really try to do the right thing, but at the same time not go too slow? How do you deal with actually getting money to the ground quickly and making sure that people have the capacity to use it? Let me say this again to all of us who are younger than 80 years old. You have not seen this in our lifetime. And when we have tried to do this in the past, because we haven't spent a lot of time building up what I call downline logistics. You'll hear me say this many, many times. Sometimes up here in Washington, they want to create a cow, and when it gets down to the ground, it looks like a pig. And the point is to make sure that what we're trying to do down here gets down to the ground with the people from the ground up, understanding it, knowing it, analyzing and working in partnership with them. One of the things that should be obvious to anybody in this country is that we have a capacity problem on the ground, notwithstanding the current circumstance that we're in. Even if the world were perfect, you have to say to yourself, are we ready to build this much stuff this fast? And the answer is if you triage it appropriately, if you plan appropriately, if you run to the fire, and one of the fires is, do we have enough people? Do we have enough materials? And if we don't, how do we create workforce training programs? How do we build capacity? How do we manufacture products here? And you understand that this is a 5 to 10 year cycle. You can actually move into it if you do it intentionally and with thought. So to answer your very specific question, there are some states that have been in this business for quite a long time and have moved big stuff, and they're obviously more prepared than others. One of the great challenges and one of the great missions the president gave us, and it falls under the umbrella of equity and climate, what about these small indigenous communities that don't have the capacity to apply for a grant? What happens if they get a grant? Do they have the ability to spend the money? And our team has raised that up, all of our agencies, and says we've got to run to that fire, and we have to start building capacity on the ground level. And then how actually are we going to do that? What does workforce training like? What does the partnership with community and technical colleges look like? How is labor going to build apprenticeship programs to lift up people of color who have not been involved in this interest? And how do you create this virtuous cycle of success and moving in one direction? This is why, back to Jeff's questions earlier, if everybody cooperates, if everybody saves their fire for all of these hot button issues that we all tend to disagree with, and don't focus that on infrastructure because there's not a Republican or a Democratic way to fill a damn pothole, then we ought to be able to get all of this stuff done more quickly and better. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what a better America looks like for President Biden. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Invited back anytime, as I always like to say. Okay, all right, did this a little bit better this time? Okay, just have a couple of items for all of you at the top. I have a bit of a hard out at 9:15 or 10 of, so we'll get around to as many people as possible. I know that many of you are tracking that we are about to reach our 1-year mark here in the administration, and we just wanted to note a couple of the points of progress that have been made that you'll hear the president talk more about and members of our administration also talk more about over the coming days. And you know how we love charts around here? So we have some charts that lay out a pretty stark contrast between where we started and where we are now. So just to highlight a couple of pieces. During the president's first year, we saw the most dramatic change in our economy of anywhere in the world. It was the biggest year of job growth in American history, and it was the direct result of actions taken by President Biden and Democrats in Congress, including the American Rescue Plan, the vaccination effort it helped fund, and now the bipartisan infrastructure law. And you can see the economic data there quite starkly. I mean, look at the initial unemployment claims. They're on average, they were at 812,000 a year ago. They're now at 210,000. The unemployment rate and obviously job creation the year before the president took office and the last year. As it relates to COVID, if we look to a year ago, only 1% of adults were fully vaccinated. 74% of adults are fully vaccinated now. In terms of at-home tests on the market, now we've talked about tests a lot, 0 on the market a year ago. Now we have 375 million people per month, or tests are distributed, I should say, per month. 46% of schools were open a year ago, now over 95%. This is progress that's been made. Obviously, there's more work that's going to be done, that needs to be done. The job is not done yet, but we have a plan to address the challenges we're facing, and we're going to stay at it. With that, Colleen, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, thanks, I wanted to ask about negotiations over voting rights. I wanted to see, what you guys are expecting this week, and then what's plan B if things go south, to secure elections and ensure voting access if the bills don't pass?
Well, as you all know, the negotiation or the debate is starting in the Senate. The president's view is that the American people deserve to see where their leaders stand on protecting their fundamental rights. That is a reason to move forward with this debate and this vote this week. And his view is also that opposing rule changes to make the protection of voting rights a reality is supporting an obstacle to protecting voting rights. It's part of the important process. In terms of so we will continue to, and you've heard the president say, and I'm sure he will reiterate for you if anyone asks him tomorrow, that until his last breath, he will be fighting for the protection of voting rights. And that means conversations and fighting to get legislation at the federal level through is going to continue. And those conversations will continue. I will note that in addition, we have also been working with organizations all across this country who are building diverse coalitions to pass voter laws and push back against those that make it harder to vote and threaten free and fair administration of elections, in addition to doing the critical work to register and educate voters. These organizations have built grassroots leadership at the state level. They're providing training, policy, research, messaging guidance, and directing organizing to register voters, deploy voter protection teams in states that are rolling back voter protection. I'd also note the Vice President knows Americans at every level are focused on this fight, and she will continue engaging and leading this effort with activists, policy leaders, and elected officials around the country. But right now our focus is on the debate, on the vote that is going to be happening, and on the fact that it will highlight very clearly for the American people who stands with them in protecting their voting rights and who stands against it.
That makes sense. What do you hope to achieve with the Secretary of State heading not only to Ukraine but then later to Geneva to meet with Lavrov, especially since talks over Ukraine aren't exactly going all that well right now?
Well, let me just give you a little bit of an update on where things stand. And obviously you're following this closely, but this morning Secretary Blinken spoke with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. They agreed to meet in Geneva, as you noted. At that meeting, Secretary Blinken will urge Russia to take immediate steps to de-escalate. He will also fly to Kyiv to consult with President Zelensky and Ukraine's leaders, and to Germany for consultations. As you also know, there is a congressional delegation that is also on their way there. And it's a note. I would note that just indicates that support for Ukraine has always been a bipartisan issue, and we welcome that. But where things stand right now, President Putin has created this crisis by amassing 100,000 Russian troops along Ukraine's borders. This includes moving Russian forces into Belarus recently for joint exercises and conducting additional exercises on Ukraine's eastern border. So let's be clear. Our view is this is an extremely dangerous situation. We're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack in Ukraine. And what Secretary Blinken is going to go do is highlight very clearly there is a diplomatic path forward. It is the choice of President Putin and the Russians to make whether they are going to suffer severe economic consequences or not. Go ahead. Oh, let me go around to people who had a question. Go ahead. Trevor.
Could you, when you're talking about kind of this meeting that the Secretary of State is going to have with Sergei Lavrov, what is the, is there an expectation that he's going to provide some sort of response to the issues that were raised in the January 10th meeting?
Oh, well, again, I don't have anything for you to specifically preview on the behind-the-scenes negotiations and discussions, but our position has been crystal clear from the beginning, the position of the President and the Secretary of State, that there are two paths. There's a diplomatic path forward. We certainly hope they take that path. There's the other path. It is up to the Russians to determine which path they're going to take, and the consequences will be severe if they don't take the diplomatic path.
And in terms of consequences, there's been reporting out of Europe that essentially this idea that's been floated about taking Russia out of the SWIFT financial payment system is basically off the table at this point. Is that accurate?
No option is off the table. In our view, we continue consulting closely with European counterparts on severe consequences for Russia if it further invades Ukraine.
And do you have a commitment from the German government that they will end the Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
I think, as you know, it is not functioning currently. You've seen the steps that they have taken recently. Germany's Federal Network Agency has suspended the certification process as well of Nord Stream 2. And our view continues to be that stopping the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is a credible piece we hold over Russia at this point in time, especially since it is not functioning. And if sanctions are imposed right now, which some are proposing, and Russia views these sanctions as a sunk cost, then this would be one less consideration in its calculus. So, of course, we're consulting closely with all of our partners and allies in this, but I would just note again that the pipeline's not operational, that Germany's Federal Network Agency has suspended the certification process. Go ahead.
Thanks. Staying on Ukraine and Russia, what does the White House make of the evacuation of Russian diplomatic staff from their embassy in Kyiv? And do you think the threat of invasion is getting higher or lower?
Well, I think, as I noted a few minutes ago, we believe we're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack on Ukraine. I would say that's more stark than we have been. In terms of the decision to evacuate their embassy or to move personnel out of their embassy, we have information that indicates the Russian government was preparing to evacuate their family members from the Russian embassy in Ukraine in late December and early January. We certainly would refer you to them for more specifics about what their decision is, but we don't have an assessment on why in the meeting.
Okay, and then another one on reports that the White House is in talks with the FAA and wireless providers on the 5G rollout and those potential disruption to airline travel. Is there anything more you can tell us on this agreement you're working on, and are you trying to prevent any flight cancellations which could start as soon as tomorrow?
Well, we are. Those conversations are ongoing. I don't have an update at this moment, but they're ongoing right now, I would say. So we have the safest airspace in the world. We're committed to reaching a solution around 5G deployment that maintains the highest level of safety while minimizing disruptions to passenger travel, cargo operations, and our economic recovery. We certainly understand what's at stake for both industries. We are actively engaged, as you said, with the FAA, FCC, wireless carriers, airlines, and aviation equipment manufacturers to reach a solution. And we believe that with continued cooperation, we can chart a path forward. But certainly, minimizing flight disruptions, ensuring safety in travel is a top priority.
And then one more, going Bloomberg on you. Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard will create the world's third biggest video game company. Does the White House have any competition concerns with this acquisition?
Well, I would just note that Today, there is an announcement by the FTC and the Justice Department that's probably happening now. Broadly speaking, this is not about this specific case, which is, in our view, a critical step towards delivering on one of the key priorities of the executive order the president signed, which is strengthening enforcement against illegal mergers. And it basically kicks off the technical process to review merger guidelines. As it relates to this specific case that you mentioned, I don't have a comment on a specific merger, but I just wanted to point you to their announcement, their press conference that may be going on right now. Go ahead. Oh, Joy, let me go ahead.
Okay.
Let me go ahead so I just get to people and ask questions.
Sure.
Thank you. There's bipartisan supply chain resiliency legislation in the House, the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. Is the White House engaged in getting lawmakers on board with this?
Very closely engaged, and we've been advocates for investing in manufacturing here in the United States, including investment in our chips manufacturing capacity, but we're very closely engaged in these discussions.
What kind of discussions you're having and where there's...
Just that we've been engaged from the beginning. The president has long been an advocate for increasing investment in our manufacturing capacity at home, and we are looking forward to it moving forward.
Another one. Does the president think that members of Congress should be prohibited from trading stocks? The president is prohibited from doing this, so where does he stand on this, and should their spouses be too?
The president didn't trade individual stocks when he was a senator. That is how he approached things. He also believes that everyone should be held to the highest standard, but he'll let members of the leadership in Congress and members of Congress determine what the rules should be. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Jen. A couple questions on what happened in Texas over the weekend.
Sure.
How is it that an individual who was known to MI5 in Britain, who was on a watch list as of 2020, ended up in a synagogue in Texas? How did that happen?
Oh, well, our understanding, and obviously we're still looking into this, is that he was checked against U.S. government databases multiple times prior to entering the country, and the U.S. government did not have any derogatory information about the individual in our systems at the time of entry. We're certainly looking back, as I referenced, at what occurred to learn every possible lesson we can to prevent attacks like this in the future. Beyond that, I'd certainly refer you to the Department of Homeland Security.
Obviously, the president referred to the incident as an act of terror. What is the significance of referring to the individual as a terrorist or referring to the incident as a terrorist incident?
I think, and I talked to the president about this that day as well, I think there's no question that when somebody goes into a house of worship and threatens and holds hostage individuals who are there, that is an act of terror. That is terrorism. That is why he called it that, because we don't need to be, because it's very clear it's what it is. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Jen. Getting back to voting rights for a minute, you mentioned that the White House administration is going to continue to push back against state legislatures. The president mentioned this as well last week, but just to drill down on that a little more, can we expect to see more litigation from the Department of Justice around this? And if you look at cases that have already been filed under Section 2, we know historically that takes a very long time, years to resolve. Are you confident that there is any action you can take that would result in any outcome before the midterms?
Well, I really refer you to the Department of Justice. As you know, they have doubled their funding for voting rights protections, but in terms of individual cases or legal intentions or actions, I would point you to them.
And quickly, to shift a little bit to healthcare and the Affordable Care Act, that was something that President Biden ran on, expanding the ACA.
Yeah.
He was able to do that, of course, through the rescue plan, but some of those other pieces were tied to Build Back Better, expanding Medicaid, again, addressing subsidies. Is there a plan B, a consideration of what steps could be taken if Build Back Better doesn't pass?
Well, here's the good news. There's a lot of interest, excitement, and engagement with a broad range of members of Congress about the shared desire to get something done and to lower costs for health care, for elder care, for child care. And there are a range of conversations that are ongoing, lots of ideas that we're discussing and we're engaged with. That is the status. The president proposed this as part of his package because he, as you said, he has advocated for, he ran on, he has fought for an expansion of access to health care, lower costs for health care. He also feels very strongly about lowering the cost cost of prescription drugs, something he thinks is frankly shouldn't be controversial in this country. If you're not for lowering the cost of prescription drugs, what are you for, Republicans in Congress, is his basic fundamental question. So this is something we will continue to discuss. We're continuing to fight for and work for. But I know there have been a range of reports out there, and I would just make very clear there is no specific proposal we are putting forward. We are just engaged in a range of conversations with members of Congress about what to do next. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Can you provide an update on the COVID testing website? Sure. Is it ready to go? Has the hotline number been created? Resiliency against crashes, that type of thing?
Sure. So covidtest.gov is in the beta phase right now, which is a standard part of the process typically as it's being kind of tested in the early stages of being rolled out. We didn't start from scratch here, of course. The Postal Service already runs a website that sells goods to the public, as you know. Every website launch, in our view, comes with risk. We can't guarantee there won't be a bug or two, but the best tech teams across the administration and the Postal Service are working hard to make this a success. So it will officially launch tomorrow morning. It's in the beta testing phase right now. And I would also note that the U.S. Digital Service, which was an organization founded after healthcare.gov, after the healthcare.gov rescue, has been supporting the Postal Service to ensure that they have what they need to be successful in this critical moment. So looking forward to an official launch tomorrow morning, and right now it's in the beta phase.
On Ukraine and Russia, I know you said that the United States is ready for Russia to engage at any time. I wanted to ask you, though, about the media narrative of the falsifying or alleging that Russia is going to say that Ukraine is going to attack Russia. Mm-hmm. Have you seen any indications of that? Has that narrative been put into work yet?
We talked about this a fair amount on Friday because we've seen efforts to push that narrative in the media and in the public. And I think one of the key roles we can play here is making very clear that there is a long history of propaganda from Russian leadership, that they use it as a tool to spread misinformation as a means of gaining ground. And we should be very clear about what's accurate and inaccurate, and that's an inaccurate narrative. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Since there are so few reporters in here today, I'd like to ask briefly about 3 transparency issues. The first one, I'm kind of amazed hasn't been brought up more in this room. That is that Vanity Fair reported recently that on October 22nd, a group of health experts from Harvard, the Rockefeller Foundation, and other groups proposed on a Zoom meeting with administration officials a plan to mass distribute coronavirus tests to homes before Christmas to prevent a winter surge of COVID-19 cases, but that they were told 3 days after that Zoom meeting that that idea was dead. So I emailed you about this yesterday and again this morning so that you'd be able to track down a firm answer on 2 details here. The first detail is which administration officials attended that October 22nd meeting. For example, did Drs. Fauci and Walensky participate? And was President Biden personally briefed at the time on that recommendation before it was passed over?
Well, maybe people haven't asked about it because we've done a lot of what was discussed in that meeting that happened a couple of months ago, including massively expanding our testing program and capacity. And the issue at the time, which was a very small part of the conversation, was that the market had not expanded enough to at that moment in time be able to launch the website we're launching tomorrow. And the president, used the Defense Production Act, invested $3 billion to expand it, quadrupled the size of our testing capacity, and now we've ordered 1 billion doses. So we see that as our COVID team, the members who participated, saw that as a very constructive meeting, a good meeting, a lot of which we've worked to implement.
So the idea, though, to mass distribute tests to homes before Christmas and New Year's, that idea was not adopted. How can President Biden shut down the virus if he's, not being briefed on these ideas? That's my question. So I'm wondering who were the advisors, and was President Biden briefed on this idea at the time?
Well, I think I just answered your question, which you may not have been listening. Maybe you were waiting to read your next question, which is fine. But I just answered your question. Let me finish, Stephen. Stephen, I'm finishing. What I said to you just a minute ago is that we did not have the capacity at the moment. We had a very constructive meeting with this group. We agreed in the need to expand our testing capacity. That's why we quadrupled the size of our testing capacity and why the president had already used the Defense Production Act to invest $3 billion. But the market did not have the capacity at that moment to do what we're doing tomorrow.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, but that's not the question I asked. The question I asked was
Do you have another question? I think I've answered your question.
Was President Biden briefed at the time?
Again, I've answered your question. If you have another one, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next person.
I didn't get answers there, but I'll move on to another one.
Great.
The second question is that in light of President Biden's first year coming to a close, the data indicates that he spent a quarter of his days, at least partially, in Delaware. In light of that, will the White House be reconsidering the decision not to release visitor log information from his Delaware residences?
Well, the president goes to Delaware because it's his home. It's also where his son and his former wife are buried. And it's a place that is obviously close to his heart. A lot of presidents go visit their home when they are president. We also have gone a step further than the prior administration and many administrations in releasing visitor logs of people who visit the White House, and we'll continue to do that. Go ahead in the back. I think we're done, and we're going to move on. Go ahead in the back.
The Reuters reported this morning the Biden administration is reviewing e-commerce giant Alibaba cloud business for U.S. national security reasons. Can you confirm?
I'd really have to check with our national security team on that. I'm happy to do that, and we'll get back to you after the briefing. Go ahead in the back.
Hey, Jen. I want to pivot back to voting rights,
Sure.
particularly the president's speech last week. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how it came together, but also I wonder if you'll respond to some of the criticism about it, that it was too aggressive or divisive, and that, you know, some of the rhetoric that he used wasn't, you know, conducive to getting folks, you know, who are opposed on board.
Well, sorry, which piece did you want me to start with?
Whichever one is best for you.
Okay. Well, I would say first that, you know, the president delivered a powerful speech about the protection of people's fundamental rights in this country, which is their right to vote, their right to vote for anyone they choose, whether it is him or someone else. It was not a partisan speech. It was intended to lay out for the public exactly what's at stake and lay out for elected officials what's at stake. And he stands by everything he said in that speech.
Can you talk a little bit about how it came together, though? Like, who did he or the White House consult with? Like, how did he land at this point? I'm just trying to get to the genesis of it.
Well, he consulted. There have been discussions for months on voting rights on the Hill with Democrats, certainly an open door to Republicans to have a discussion among members and among staff about a path forward, something that 16 Republicans who are serving today have supported in the past. And also he consulted a lot with civil rights leaders. We consulted with civil rights leaders, with voting rights activists, and others who have been working around the clock to advocate for voting rights. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Let me ask you a couple questions. First, what is the administration or the White House doing today on the 5G controversy, if
Sure.
anything, in the remaining hours before the midnight deadline?
So there are ongoing discussions right now with members of our economic team who are closely engaged with at the FAA, FCC, wireless carriers, airlines, and aviation equipment manufacturers to reach a solution. As you noted, tomorrow is the deadline. Our objective is, of course, to reach a solution around 5G deployment that maintains the highest level of safety while minimizing disruptions to passenger travel. That's what we're working towards, but everyone from Secretary Pete Buttigieg to members of our economic team are closely engaged in these discussions.
And heading into the president's press conference tomorrow on the eve of his one-year anniversary, he has long said that he would talk straight from the shoulder, I think is his words, to give an honest assessment of things. What is your honest assessment of the last year of the Biden administration, and how can the voting rights failure not be seen as some type of a metaphor for these challenges?
Well, I would say in terms of voting rights, his view is that it's never a good idea not to shoot for the moon with what your proposals are and what you're fighting for. And the alternative is to fight for nothing, and to fight for nothing hard. And that oftentimes, as you know, you've covered a couple of administrations, you don't get everything done in the first year. But what we feel good about, and this is why I brought some of these charts to show the contrast, is that coming into an incredibly difficult circumstance, fighting a pandemic, an economic, a massive economic downturn as a result, an administration that was prior to us that did not effectively deal with a lot of these crises, that there's been a lot of progress made. We need to build on that. The work is not done. The job is not done. And we are certainly not conveying it is. So our objective, and I think what you'll hear the president talk about tomorrow, is how to build on the foundation we laid in the first year. Go ahead.
On 5G, the FAA has had 2 years to come up with a plan for this, to deal with this implementation. Should they have acted sooner to minimize disruption? Did the FAA drop the ball here?
You know, I think, Mary, there'll be lots of time to look back and see how we got here, and I know many of you will do that, and of course that is understandable. But right now, over the next 24 or less than 24 hours, what we're focused on is trying to come to a solution that will minimize travel disruptions to passenger travel, cargo operations, and our economic recovery, and that is why it's so important to hopefully come to an agreement and ensure more planes are flying out there.
Go ahead. On voting rights, unless something has dramatically changed, which it doesn't seem likely this is going to fail, you have made clear that the president, is going to keep up this fight with every last breath he has. Does that mean that this is the top priority going forward legislatively? I ask because obviously BBB is still stalled as well. Where's the president going to be putting his energy?
We can and will advocate for both. That is reflective of what's happening now, too. Of course, voting rights is right now being debated. It's going to be on the floor. The president was out last week, as you know, giving a powerful speech about why this is so important to move forward. At the same time, we were having a range of conversations on Build Back Better because we also want to get that done. So we're going to keep fighting for both. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. The airlines are using some pretty dire language to describe what's going to happen tomorrow if the president doesn't step in and take action. They're saying that the nation's commerce will grind to a halt, that the vast majority of the traveling and shipping public will essentially be grounded. Does the president share the view that the airlines have about how bad this is going to be if the White House doesn't step in?
Well, I think what we're trying to do now is come to a solution to avoid exactly that. And it is true that if there are hundreds or thousands of flights that are grounded, that means not just disruptions to passenger travel, that also means cargo operations. That means that goods aren't moving around as quickly and effectively as they need to in order to not have supply chain disruptions. So this is something that we are very focused on, we've been closely engaged on, and we want to avoid that and prevent it.
Can you explain why the FAA and the FCC seem to have different views here? The FAA seems to share some of the concerns that the airlines have about the possible implications of implementing 5G, whereas the FCC has said, based on the data it's seen, it's not a problem.
Well, I think part of this is having a negotiation and trying to find a solution. I'm not going to speak for the FCC, which is, of course, independent. Our objective is to prevent this from becoming the economic disruption that you referenced in your question. Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. You mentioned the beta testing is already underway in regards to the COVID-19 testing website. One of my colleagues discovered that they're already you are already able to purchase them, or not purchase them, order them for free online. So, for people who are purchasing them today, are these orders being registered? Are they going to be able to get their...
that's beta testing. Okay. So meaning we're going to launch it formally tomorrow morning, but this is how we did vaccines.gov as well. So it's kind of a part of the process.
Do you have an official rollout tomorrow morning? What time in the morning can we expect?
I don't have the exact time for you at this moment, but again, it's going to be out tomorrow morning, mid-morning tomorrow, and we're looking forward to getting free tests out to the public.
And on the same topic, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan yesterday on Face the Nation said the federal government has, quote, fallen short in a couple ways recently in regards to its COVID-19 response. He pointed to these 500 million rapid tests, saying the federal government has purchased tests that his state had already contracted rather than purchasing new tests. He said, quote, we're sort of hijacking the tests that we already had plans for, and we're now getting some of those providers to tell us they no longer have the rapid test. So what is the White House's response to that criticism that the federal government is purchasing the same allotment of tests and hamstringing some state efforts here?
I'd have to check into that, on the accuracy of that with our COVID team, and I'm happy to do that. All right, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Audio Jungle.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide, in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, a reality check for Apple's mixed reality headset, now facing a new delay. What this means for the iPhone maker's push into the metaverse. Plus, the largest crypto fund to date, crypto exchange FTX, is launching a $2 billion venture fund. Our conversation with the person in charge of putting all that cash to work this hour. And the internet's latest obsession, Wordle, how a game invented in 2018 is suddenly going viral. We'll get to all of that in a moment, but first let's get a look at the markets. Volatility was the buzzword of the day. Our Ed Ludlow here with the latest. Ed,
I mean, Wordle is still the buzzword of any day at the moment, but volatility, I mean, it's been a jittery week in financial markets, right? Volatility, choppy trading, call it what you will. Investors taking on board rising yields, the outlook for rates, inflation, the Omicron variant. But we ended positively Friday, right? We saw this rebound in stocks late in Friday's session, particularly in tech stocks. You see that outperformance in the NASDAQ 100, closing up 0.8%, while the S&P 500 is basically flat. Outperformance, particularly in mega caps, the NYSE FANG Plus index up more than 1%. And Bitcoin really moving in the same way, seeing kind of a rebound as people kind of became more confident buying into equities on Friday. It's that time of the week, Emily, where I get to ask my favorite question. Of course, you know what it is. What is Bitcoin? Come with me into my Bloomberg terminal. Let's think about this for just a moment, right? Because we've been talking about Bitcoin. Is it an inflation hedge? Is it a risk asset like an equity? Is it a commodity? Well, what you see on the screen in the right-hand side is the correlation between Bitcoin and tech stocks, the NASDAQ 100 specifically. It's a reading of 0.4. 1 means a perfect correlation. They're moving in lockstep. -1, they're moving in opposite directions. So at 0.4, you know, we see in that chart throughout 2020, 2021, that correlation's been high, but it's been creeping up after dropping off at the beginning of this year. They're moving in lockstep. And it has a lot of people asking again, what is Bitcoin? Is it an inflation hedge? Because it seems to be behaving very much like a risk asset, like equity. It's not going to go away, the question. We'll keep at it. Two big corporate stories you're going to talk about in a moment with Mark Scoop Dog Gurman. But Apple, closing up 0.5%, 0.5%, but it did drop on news, according to sources, that the AR/VR headset is delayed due to some specific issues. Big news for that company. And Meta, according to sources, being looked at, particularly Oculus, by the FTC and antitrust practices in that virtual reality business, Emily.
All right, Ed, thanks much. Let's get to that Meta news. The FTC and multiple states are investigating Meta's virtual reality unit Oculus over potential anti-competitive practices. Our Mark Scoot Dog Gurman here with the details. Mark, look, what exactly is the FTC interested in? What did Meta potentially do wrong here?
The FTC wants to know a few things. They want to know how Meta is able to sell their headset for $299
which undercuts the price of many competitors from HTC and other providers. They want to know if their App Store practices are stifling competition. They want to know how Meta, through Oculus, is hurting third-party virtual reality developers. So they've been talking to several developers over the past few months or so. This is both the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and states, including New York, Tennessee, and North Carolina. And I think this is going to be a long-running investigation. And yet it's yet another time that government officials are looking into Meta, and other technology companies, obviously like Apple and Google and Amazon, are also under lots of scrutiny.
Absolutely. Just another headache for Meta. I do want to move on to Apple and your story that its AR/VR headset, which we've been long anticipating, in part because of your reporting, could be delayed. What did you know?
This might actually be yet another headache for Meta, because based on what we've been hearing, the capabilities of this first mixed reality headset from Apple are going to be pretty hot and hard for Facebook to compete with its first mixed reality headset next year. But speaking of the news, we're hearing that there is probably going to be a few-month delay at minimum for Apple's headset. That's because of development challenges stemming from the device overheating, from software, and from camera technology. What Apple's trying to do is they're trying to cram in processors that you normally get in a MacBook Pro or a very high-end desktop computer into a headset that you wear on your face that doesn't need to be plugged in. And controlling the thermal system and overheating and the battery for that is a very, tricky thing to do. And so that's what Apple has been grappling with. I still think they're going to introduce the headset either late in 2022 or sometime early in 2023, and then release it more widely in 2023.
How important is this new headset going to be to Apple's product lineup?
Yeah, this is going to be in the early innings. It's not going to sell that much. Apple has projected selling 1 unit per day per retail store. From what we're told from supply chain partners, there's forecasts of selling between 7 and 10 million units for the first year on sale. And then from there, they're only going to continue to build up momentum with follow-up models, augmented reality, glasses further down the road, right? So there is a long roadmap ahead for the AR and VR product line, and you're going to see them expand on it and build on it, just like they've built upon the iPad, the iPod, well before that, the iPhone, and the Apple Watch, and the AirPods more recently.
All right, Mark Gurman, thanks so much for that update. I want to talk a little bit more about Apple now with Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities. Dan, what's your take on Mark's report that this headset, which could potentially be really important, but not, perhaps the biggest sales, at least not right away, could be delayed?
Look, there's a lot of complexity in terms of building out what we'll define as Apple Glass. We believe this is something that they want to introduce potentially in the summer and ultimately start to sell in the fall, called late fall. There are a lot of technology hurdles. They want to make sure they get this right. And we still think the timetable is to have this ready for holiday season. Right? And the street sort of views this as just the first start of what could be a broader growth initiative here. And we think that this could add about $20 per share to the stock once they officially launch it.
We've got earnings coming up amidst a broader tech sell-off, and Apple has not been immune. What are you expecting?
I think for Apple, it's a tale of two cities because underlying demand is outstripping supply by about 12 to 14 million units. So I think what we're going to see is a strong earnings that probably beats the street by about 5% coming out of the gate. They'll be cautious in terms of the supply chain, but ultimately I think they up guidance, going into the next year, despite some of those supply chain issues. I think services right now could be on a run rate about 80 billion for the year. And then you look what's happened on iPhone, I think that's something that continues to track ahead of the street. That's why, despite all the Fed news, despite all the macro worries, I think when fundamentals come for Apple, that's a positive catalyst in our opinion. I think sends the stock back above the $3 trillion market cap.
What's your outlook for big tech equities over the course of the year, given news or no news from the Fed?
Look, I think right now you're in a vacuum of news where until fundamentals come in terms of earnings, Street's going to have that risk off. I continue to view it as cloud and chips are going to lead us higher. I think fundamentally the digital transformation that we're seeing is actually accelerating into the next year, not decelerating, because we think about $1 trillion is going to be spent in the cloud the next 4 years. That's what we're focused on. So some of the froth will get taken out of the market. It's clearly a bit of a white knuckle period for tech. But I think we look back on this time a year from now, and this was an opportunity where it's our view that we're still in the middle innings of this tech bull rally.
Meantime, I want to turn to Tesla, where we're still seeing demand outstrip supply. At what point does supply meet demand, and how?
Well, Austin's so important. We think by next week, Tesla's basically going to be ready to start producing Model Y cars in Austin, which is extremely important to the broader story, because you combine what's happening in Austin plus Berlin, we think launches sometime in February, and China, there'll be about 2 million unit capacity by the end of the year. So they're about double capacity. And right now, Tesla doesn't have a demand issue, it's a supply issue. I think we're going to see with Tesla, they're going to start really seeing acceleration out of China and Europe. And there was some noise with the Cybertruck moving to 2023. That's a positive thing, because in my view, it's all right now about Model Y and Model 3. Cybertruck is a 2023 story, which is very in line with where GM, Ford, and others are.
Do want to ask a quick question about Meta, because it does seem heading into the year. Of course, they just got a little bit of bad news with the FTC and that Oculus investigation. But I wonder if you think the name change and the at least outward pivot seems to have worked in terms of tamping down the bad press.
I mean, it's going to go in the Genius PR Hall of Fame in terms of that name change. Now, of course, strategically, they're focused on the metaverse, but everyone knows, I mean, their core monetization is social media monetization on the advertising front. But it is something where they were going through a lot of black eye situations that taken some of the heat off them, but now it's about them executing, and that's what the street's going to be focused on. But the regulatory environment for big tech, they're going to be spending a lot of time either in person or virtually in the 202 area code.
All right, and yet that litigation piling up. Dan Ives of Wedbush, always good to have you on the show. Thank you for stopping by. Well, Netflix says it plans to spend more on programming at a price. The streaming service announcing it's raised the price of its monthly subscription packages in the U.S. The changes posted on the Netflix website stating the basic plan, which allows just one user at a time, will go up by $1, while the premium service will get a $2 boost. Coming up, the largest employer so far to stop President Biden's vaccination or test mandate. Could General Electric's decision sway other employers? That is next. This is Bloomberg.
I think that 2022 may be the year that the pandemic enters an endemic phase, but it really depends on what happens and the decisions that are made across the world. And so that are encouraging in some ways, but I think that we have to stay very vigilant.
Moderna co-founder Noubar Afeyan sharing his view that the COVID-19 pandemic could ultimately become endemic, similar to what we see with the flu. He added that Moderna's booster shot, specifically tweaked to tackle Omicron, could be ready to start trials within weeks. This as the Supreme Court blocked the Biden administration's vaccine or test mandate for large employers. General Electric announced Friday it is suspending implementation of that mandate, the largest employer yet to do so. Bloomberg Government's Alex Ruoff with us now. So, Alex, the big question is how many other employers are going to follow suit?
Yeah, that is a big question. There's a big disparity across the country on this now. Now that the federal mandate, has been blocked by the courts, it's kind of up to where these companies are located. About 13 states prohibit vaccine mandates of kind of any kind. While about 20 some have some type of mandate of their own for maybe state employees or healthcare workers. So like a lot of things, when the federal solution, is blocked, it kind of ends up a big hodgepodge across the country. So it's really going to depend on where you live.
Does the administration have a next move legally with these mandates?
Well, that's pretty complicated. The OSHA, which started the large employment rule, has other tools in its tool belt. But, the Biden administration, at the beginning of the of Biden's term, he did not, he said he didn't want to do mandates. He thought, as the vaccines rolled out, there was a lot of, if you remember, there was a period of time where people were getting baseball tickets and, money and bonuses and free beer for vaccines. And that really topped out its effectiveness, and then they kind of had to switch to mandates, to coercion at this point. But yeah, the amount of tools in the federal toolbox is very limited in that regard, in terms of making mandates. Some of these are still around. The healthcare, the one for doctors, nurses, healthcare workers was upheld by the court, and there's others in place. But yeah, I think they're really limited in what they can do next to, really get people to get vaccinated.
Exactly. What else can they do to get people vaccinated or beat back the virus? I mean, 500 million or even 1 billion rapid tests is nice, but it's only a snapshot of a moment in time and, more than 300 million Americans.
Yeah, that is the big, it looks like the amount of, the percentage of the U.S. that's been vaccinated is kind of holding steady. It's a little bit over 60%. They've really been trying to crack that kind of, 3/4 of the country or 2/3 of the country to get vaccinated. It's really they've slowed a lot in terms of the percentage. And there are a lot of questions about how you fulfill this. There's a lot of expectation that as this becomes endemic, as a year or so passes by, we're probably not, there's an expectation that we're not going to see a big change here. And where we are, maybe, where we are as a country for at least the next year or so.
Wow. All right. Bloomberg Government's Alex Ruoff. We shall see what the year holds. Coming up, the future of SPACs. After 2021 being a record year for SPAC deals, where are we headed in 2022? We'll hear from a new SPAC CFO directly next. This is Bloomberg. Apologies for getting this song stuck in your head, but Baby Shark just hit a major milestone on YouTube. It has now been viewed more than 10 billion times. It already was the most viewed video on YouTube of all time. That record set back in November of 2020, but it is now the only video ever to reach 10 billion views. And we're all going to be singing it now all night long. Well, let's talk SPACs and what the market looks like for this year. Joining us to talk about that and more, Claudia Gast, CFO of the Global Technology Acquisition Corp, a newly formed SPAC that intends to focus on tech companies and financial tech. So, Claudia, obviously there was a big SPAC frenzy, then they pulled back a bit. Some have been doing much better than others. Why take the SPAC route?
Thanks, Emily, for having me. It's great to be here. Like you mentioned, 2021 was an exciting year. 613 SPACs went to market, and we have already 4 that priced last week, and we have 270 in the pipeline. So it's shaping up to be an exciting year. We've been long-term investors, operators, and entrepreneurs, and we've backed more than 1,000 entrepreneurs and 600 companies. And so this was a natural step to us to go from the VC and the hedge fund background to go into the SPAC market, into an opportunity to bring good private companies into the public market and support them through the journey with our team.
What do you plan to buy?
That's a great question. We've been having late last year great conversations, and our main focus is marketplaces, fintech, and SaaS. this is truly where our expertise lays. And those are the kind of companies that we're talking to right now. And, as you mentioned, some of the market, we had very high valuations about a year ago last year. The market kind of softened up in Q2 and Q3. And December alone last year, we saw 25 mergers completed. So, we're coming from a strong end of the year and very excited about the beginning of this year. What we're seeing is that with the rising interest, the valuations being adjusted as a result of that, the SPAC vehicle, it becoming a very good, tool for entrepreneurs to look for some certainty as they come to the public market.
The SEC has been pretty active looking into SPACs and reverse mergers, and we're about to hit rate liftoff cycle. Do you wish you'd done this sooner?
No, look, we actually did it at the right time. We navigated through the process, worked collectively through the SEC as the different steps came in. And it is true that there's 580 SPACs looking for opportunities, but all 2022, the great competitor was cash and cash availability. And for large public corporations, M&A, it's been competitive against private equities as well, and now against SPACs. So really, cash is through the truly competitor, and so it doesn't really make a difference for us in terms of finding a good company to bring to market.
Investors have embraced Tesla as the biggest car maker by market value. Ford also soaring, and then you've got some of these other new entrants that did go public via SPAC, Lordstown, Nikola, that have little in terms of revenue. Do you think or worry that we could be in the process of a bubble bursting?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at other companies like, the Lucid that was brought in by Churchill, it is true that there is some companies like Lordstown that maybe will be, struggling and bringing sort of the average down. But it is a matter of, do we have the right asset? If I think about in general for SPACs, what's the key, for a SPAC to be successful is that number one, find the right target, have the right team, and have the right operating team behind it to be able to, to continue the journey of a public company. So it really depends of the asset you truly bring to market.
So what's your general outlook for the SPAC market? Does this continue to be a more niche route of going public? Does it become more popular or not?
We see the SPAC, call it, investment vehicle as a good alternative for, to go public together with direct listing and IPO. And what we expect to see is a couple of things. I think in 2022 and 2023, towards the end of 2022 and early 2023, we might see some of the SPACs coming to term. In average over the past, let's say, call it 5 years, there's been about 5% of SPACs that had to wind down. I think in the coming years or two, we're going to see the same, just with a larger volume. At the same time, there is an opportunity for for SPACs to find the right match, and so we do believe it's going to continue to be a prominent vehicle, but we expect to see less of new time issuers and more of sort of repeated issuers. So we think the market sort of is going to bifurcate in that sense.
Any sectors you're staying away from deliberately?
Well, specifically, we've stayed away in the past from healthcare because that's an area that hasn't been our space. Truly, our focus is with marketplaces, fintech and SaaS. And some of us see a marketplace, everywhere. So it really depends on how you look at it. But generally, those are the key areas where we want to focus.
All right. Claudia Gast, CFO of the Global Technology Acquisition Corp. We'll be watching to see the next move you make. Thank you. Coming up, we'll be joined by FTX's Amy Wu, who is leading the exchange's new $2 billion fund to invest in crypto startups and more. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Crypto exchange FTX is launching a $2 billion venture fund, one of the largest to date, to tap into the crypto market startups and beyond. I want to bring in Amy Wu to talk more about this. She joined FTX from Lightspeed Ventures, where she led investments in gaming, crypto, and other startups, and was brought in to lead FTX's new fund. Amy, thanks so much for joining us. $2 billion is a big number. Where do you plan to spend it?
Well, we are super excited to be, one of the new strategic funds to deploy capital into the broader crypto and Web3 ecosystem. We believe that we're still pretty early in the market, and you can, define by number of users. We're still at, I would say, less than half a billion users trading crypto globally, and fewer than actually 20 million people trading in DeFi. So we're still very early, hundreds of millions of users to be onboarded, and we want to help the ecosystem get there.
Now, all of this money, as I understand it, came from Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder and CEO, and FTX. Normally, when you raise a fund, it's from a lot of other investors who you then have to answer to. How does the structure of this make things different for you, having come from a traditional venture fund, given that you don't have to answer to all of these LPs?
Well, the exciting thing is that, we have the size of fund to be able to write a very large range of checks. So anything from, $100,000 to $500 million checks, we are able to write, and also in multi-stage companies. And also without outside partners and LPs, we're just able to move really fast and really focus on providing value that is sort of our expertise and resources across FTX's global ecosystem of partners, and really focus on the founding team.
Meantime, there's so much talk and concern, especially from newer investors, about the direction of the crypto market, concerns about a crypto winter, a death cross coming. We just had John Wu, the head of Ava Labs, who thinks a golden cross is ahead instead. Where do you think the market is going to move ahead, and how does that influence where and how you place your bets?
Well, I think there's, trading crypto, and then there's making investments in the ecosystem. I don't think anybody can really predict what the market is going on a short-term basis, and perhaps even medium-term basis. But, I think, we certainly are super bullish about the long-term trajectory of blockchain technology adoption. And so, with this fund, we have a long-term, and by that I mean, years, measured in years and decades, view into the technology being adopted cross categories. So, Web3, consumer, gaming, infrastructure, software, software, healthcare, and other categories.
Meantime, crypto funds seem to be everywhere. There's Paradigm, there's Coinbase launching their own fund, Katie Haun from Andreessen Horowitz launching her own fund. Andreessen Horowitz, of course, has its own crypto fund. Are all of these funds going to be chasing the same names? And if so, how do you convince various startups and founders that your money is the money they should take?
Yeah, so I think you're seeing a lot of different types of investors coming into the crypto market because, it is a fairly nascent space, and it reflects the size of opportunity and also the number of developers and founding teams in this category. So there's a lot of great teams to back. And in terms of why they should go with FTX Ventures, I would say, we're launching with 8 people on the team, and it's a team of both investors and also engineers. And, everybody has had a significant amount of time and expertise in the space. And so our objectives with the fund is we want to be closer. We want to be really hands-on with teams and make fewer investments, but go a lot deeper in our value add process.
You're also across the gaming vertical, and I'm curious, how do you find the next Axie Infinity that's going to take this world by storm?
Yeah, gaming's a really exciting category for us, for both the venture side and also FTX more broadly. It is the largest, entertainment category in the world. It's about $200 billion per year industry in content alone. And also, gamers historically have valued in-game digital assets. You could say that they really pioneered the usage and value of that. And it's pretty natural extension to think that they will want to own the assets as well. There's some controversy around, I think a lot of gamers wrapping their minds around the concept of NFTs, but we're super bullish around it. And in terms of how to find these gaming studios, what we're looking for are teams that are both very experienced in making games and have had experience doing so, and also have an idea of innovative ways to adopt NFT and blockchain tech.
So what's next? Obviously, there's a lot of money chasing a lot of potential deals, but there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. Is there anything you're going to stay away from? What sort of crypto projects out there don't have the right stuff?
It's a nuanced and question, Emily. I would say that this year, we're always very closely looking at and understanding the regulatory environment, and that is, the set of rules in the U.S. and that is still emerging and also different across jurisdictions. So I would say, in the context of what's developing, we're going to be looking at teams that that also respects that that it's important to be compliant to regulatory and frameworks. And it's also an area that we can also add value, since on the exchange side, we have so much expertise into that.
All right. Amy Wu, Head of Ventures and Commercial at FTX, thank you for joining us. We'll be watching your next move. Coming up, the Earth keeps setting records as global temperatures continue to rise. But my next guest is trying to do his part to stop it, or as he calls it, turn buildings into Teslas, one building at a time. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Well, these last 8 years have been the hottest on record. 2021 ranked as the 6th hottest year, according to analysis by NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. As the globe continues to warm, more companies are doing their part, or trying to stop it. My next guest has been working for a decade now to try green America's cities by modernizing heating and cooling systems to make buildings more energy efficient. Joining me now, Danelle Bayard. He is the CEO of Block Power. And Danelle, the way you put it is you're trying to turn buildings into Teslas. How exactly does the technology work?
Absolutely. So buildings right now burn fossil fuels for heating, for cooling, for hot water. Just like Tesla has taken the fossil fuel engine out of vehicles and replaced it with an all-electric engine, we can now take that fossil fuel heating, cooling, and hot water equipment out of buildings and replace it with 100% electric, clean, green, smart hardware and equipment that uses electricity to provide heating, cooling, and hot water. So we can totally electrify and decarbonize buildings.
Talk to us about the business model. You just raised $30 million in new funding. How do you plan to spend that money and make this a sustainable proposition for homeowners?
Well, we're going to go building to building across America. There's 125 million buildings or around that across the country, and we need to decarbonize all of those buildings because buildings represent about 30% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. And so we know we have to decarbonize buildings and move them from fossil fuels to electricity in order to reach our climate goals. And so Block Power, we use machine learning, statistical modeling, the latest and greatest tech from Silicon Valley. We borrow money from Wall Street. We purchase the clean energy equipment. We loan it or lease the equipment to building owners so that they can afford it. We lease it to them over time. We save each and every building owner money, and they repay us out of the savings that are generated because our systems make buildings more efficient and more profitable. They generate savings so that building owners can repay us for upgrading to clean energy systems.
You're based in Brooklyn, and I have to ask about that devastating fire that killed 17 people. The thought was that a space heater was left on for days, perhaps because there wasn't enough heat to heat the entire building. Could your work help eliminate the need for this supplemental heat that we know can cause fires?
That that building fire was a terrible, terrible tragedy, and our heart goes out to everyone who was impacted. The building actually had a bunch of complaints. A lot of tenants and residents called the government to complain about a lack of heat, and that's why there was that need for supplemental heat. But unfortunately, in buildings across the Bronx and buildings across America, the energy systems are inefficient, they're old, they're outdated, they're unhealthy. And in too many buildings, energy systems are death traps. They're unhealthy, they're dangerous. And you will see the kind of dangerous and unhealthy impacts as we see here. I grew up in a building like this in a low-income community back in Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy when it was a really low-income community in the 80s. We didn't have a functioning heating system at all. And we would heat our apartment by turning on the oven and open up the oven door and letting the heat from the oven heat up our apartment. And then we'd open up the windows to release carbon monoxide and all the toxins that were coming out of the oven. And so in far too many buildings across America, there's millions and millions of Americans who have old, antiquated, inefficient systems, and those systems are dangerous. We think that by upgrading these buildings to modern technology, it's 2022. We shouldn't be burning oil and gas in basements and using space heaters to heat buildings. We can use modern, cutting-edge, cloud-connected, high-efficiency electric devices to green all of America's buildings.
You also teamed up with the city of New York to create more than 1,000 jobs in green energy, hiring at-risk workers. What does that mean? And talk to us about how this initiative will work.
Yeah, so as part of the COVID recovery and COVID response, the White House allowed cities to use COVID response dollars to actually train and hire folks from high crime communities to do green construction work, to be trained, to be employed, to go building to building, to install internet antenna to help close the digital divide so that children could learn remotely, to install solar panels, as we're doing on a project in Staten Island today, to decarbonize the building's heating and cooling systems, as we've been talking about. And so we've created this civilian climate corps by hiring 500 adults from the highest crime communities in New York City. So, in the Bronx and Harlem and Jamaica, Queens and Brownsville, Brooklyn, we hire these folks, we train them to go building to building and do green construction upgrades that hopefully will help to prevent fires and other kinds of dangerous outcomes like the building in the Bronx. Okay.
Danelle Baird, CEO of Block Power, fascinating work you're doing. We'll continue to track your progress. Coming up, watch out, Adele. Encanto is here for the #1 spot. Disney's newest film has overthrown the pop star for #1 album on the Billboard 200. We've got all the deets. And Wordle, it is going viral. We'll decrypt how it came to be the phenomenon it is today and what people are saying about it on the internets. This is Bloomberg.
Many years ago, this candle blessed our family with a miracle. Our house, our casita.
There's no denying Disney's Encanto is a hit, but not only in the box office, it's having a second life on music and video streaming services. The soundtrack to the film becoming the #1 album in the U.S. this week on the Billboard 200, bumping Adele's 30 from the top spot. Our Chris Palmieri joins us now with more. So Disney has a hit on its hands, huh, Chris?
Yeah, and it's hard to say whether this is just one of those pandemic things or whether it's really a glimpse of the future of the entertainment business, because this came out on Thanksgiving. It did okay. Obviously, parents reluctant to, take their kids to the theaters. Gets released a month later on Disney Plus, and, coinciding with the Omicron surge, and starts to really take off. People are posting videos on TikTok. The song We Don't Talk About Bruno is a big hit, goes to #1, as you mentioned, and it really just, kids are watching it again and again, at home, and it just becomes a one of those phenomena.
So talk to us about the potential life this could have. You know, obviously, whenever Disney has a hit like this, there's obviously ongoing, franchising, merchandising, theme park opportunities. Does Encanto get to that level?
Certainly, they already had characters at the theme park, and they'll probably build on that. The consumer product side of this, we looked into that a little bit. It's doing okay. It's not really, doesn't have a breakthrough toy like that Frozen dress from a few years ago. But this really is also about the streaming business, and Disney. All of these folks need to put up fresh movies and TV shows on their streaming platforms. And this keeps people engaged with Disney Plus, which is so critical to the company's future. And then you wonder in the future if, there used to be so much focus on releasing a movie in that first big weekend in theaters, if maybe there won't be more attention paid to the online release of a movie.
Now, Rich Greenfield of Lightshed has been pretty bearish on Disney Plus, super bullish on Netflix, doesn't think Disney has the content to keep new subscribers coming to Disney Plus. What else does Disney have on tap?
Well, they promised this huge increase in spending next year, $30 billion, and this year, I'm sorry. And so, there's a lot of money, a lot of shows. We're going to see big movies this year, Avatar 2, for example, next Black Panther. There's going to be a lot coming out, assuming it doesn't all get interrupted, by COVID and having to, reschedule these shoots.
All right. Well, we'll be watching to see more of those hits keep coming. Bloomberg's Chris Palmieri, thanks for that update. Well, it's a simple word game that has the entire internet going crazy. Wordle. It has been trending the whole week as people try to guess the game's 5-letter word in 6 tries every day. Only one word puzzle a day, and it's the same word for everyone. As you can see here, don't worry, no spoilers, this isn't today's word, but after each guess, the tiles change colors to show which letters are not in the word in gray, which letters are in the word but in the wrong position in yellow, and which ones are correctly in the word and in the right position in green. This is our going viral of the week. Gotta say, our Ed Ludlow here to tell us more. And Ed, we Wordle dueled today. I think it was your first time.
It was my first
right?
time. Yeah, it was my first time, and it was frustrating because I wasn't as good at it as I thought I'd be. And I've been looking into Wordle. This is what's so strange about things that go viral, things that trend, like Chris was just talking about with Encanto, released in Thanksgiving, popular now. Wordle was brought out in October, but now it's a big focus for everyone online. All of our colleagues, big names out there on Twitter playing with it, and it's addicting. Of course it is, but because it's only available once a day. Once a day.
Once a day. It was my second time, and I believe we have, there's yours. There's your score. The thing that's so great about this is you can tweet your score. I got mine in 4 tries. Not bad. I'm going to try to improve upon that too. But talk to us about why this suddenly became so popular. It started in 2018, but it's only now that, Jimmy Fallon and other celebrities are tweeting about it.
Yeah, so it was founded by a guy called Josh Wardle, a developer, used to work at Reddit. It started as something that he would play with his partner, just the two of them, right? He has a background in programming, and he actually had a previous attempt, a few years back, making it public. It didn't go very well, and he's been talking to the media a lot this week. He has become a star himself. Josh Wardle, the founder of this thing, talking about the beauty of it is its limitations, right? No push notifications. It's not in your face. It's not like the other apps on my iPhone where I'm getting hit 5 times a day, like, check me out, come back to me, play with me. It's once a day, and it's that scarcity or restriction which he says is what's driving people towards it. It's infuriating. If you do badly on your first go, like I did, then you want to go again straight away, but you can't. You got to wait until the next morning.
The Wordle means are off the hook. I gotta say, have been entertained by them all day long. And as you say, just one a day, and as soon as you're finished with it, you want the next one. or you want to play the ones that came before and they're gone. The other thing that's happening is people are mistaking Wordle in the App Store for other similarly named games, and Apple has a big confusing problem on its hand.
I mean, that's just kudos to Wordle, right? That's just a hat tip to how good the thing is that copycats rose up the charts on the App Store, had to be removed. It's just astonishing. I mean, the game itself, it's become a cultural icon in a week. You know, people challenging themselves for what is basically a spelling bee, right? You know, they were talking, Josh Wardle's told the press about how he used to love the New York Times spelling bee, for example. That's what got him into this. You know, I think the Scrabble dictionary only has like 9,000 five-letter words anyway, but it's something that's become so widespread, you know. And when I was talking about October, you know, there was like a dozen people each day playing in the early days of November, maybe 90 in early November. There are hundreds of thousands playing each day now, and you can see how quickly it's taken off. Is it a pandemic thing, Em? I don't know. Like, it's so basic. It's a daily 3-minute exercise, or 1 minute if you're really good. You can see it staying, right? You can see it hanging around.
I'm a word game buff, and I think I'd play it anyway. There's also this new thing, an Absurdle, which is a spin-off, and it basically tries to stay ahead of you, keep you at bay, changing its secret word for as many times as possible, but still remaining consistent to the information it's given so far. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm feeling good about my chances.
Again, it's just homage to the success of Wordle. Just one really quick thing, Em. You know, in an episode of the show where we're talking about AR and VR headsets, cutting-edge technology that we're desperate to get our hands on, how funny is it that we're actually hung up on a 3-minute game, basic code online, and all you can do is have one single try at it? Amazing.
No apps, no push notifications, just a simple word game. Love it. All right. Thanks, Ed. And thank you all for watching. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Stay with Bloomberg. My colleague David Weston coming up next with Wall Street Week. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Have a wonderful weekend.
You the theory of what's happening with the black family, black wealth, and the fear of a black man. It's the black American experience that we truly look at, plagued by traumatic history and countless chances of accountability from all parties involved. Join us, and let's get in tune with the Transform You Black Commentary Show with your host, Marcus Art. Now here's your host.
Hello, my people. Let me take this off, at least one ear, so you guys can better understand me. Too much echo. It ain't working out. Regardless of the fact, though, welcome to the Black Commentary Podcast Show. This is bothering me terribly. Too much violence. So we got a great show for you guys today, and let me get that up. So today we're going to be talking about something very important. We're going to be talking about MLK Day, not so much the history of the day, not so much Martin Luther King Jr. We gonna talk about him, but we really want to zoom in and focus tonight, for those who are watching live tonight, for those who going to hear this on the playback. We're going to focus on our ancestors that might have marched with him, might have been around during that time, and those who still living right now. Those who passed and that particular generation that might have counseled and took advice from those that generation above them. Okay, and maybe there were even older individuals who were still around, and we do know this. Our record books will tell us that like there still was some generations, a generation around during that generation that marched with Martin Luther King. There was maybe even like two generations above that generation that was still around, that gave some insight and wisdom, and they might have tried to warn the young. They were young around that time. That generation that like marched and protested with Dr. King and joined in the civil rights movement. They were young then, so for the generations that were above them, that might have been their dads, their grandparents that were still around, and if you put that into huge perspective, right? For us that are in this generation right now, that's like our great, maybe even for some great, you add another great grandparents. Now, for those in the who had relatives that were around during the civil rights movement, maybe it's just one or two generations, or maybe for some of the newer generations, just three generations apart, which is not that much. Think about it, that's not that much. So when we say ancestors, you don't even have to go that far back to wonder, are your ancestors, are the ones who came before you, happy with how you are carrying out your life, how you are exercising the liberties and the freedoms that they were ultimately dying for, or putting their life on the risk for, and maybe for a lot others died for, fought for. Okay. When we look at what many would call the ghetto, okay, and this term ghetto, right? Some don't like it, but it's become a term that for most of Black America has started to embrace. They have embraced it fully. So to be called ghetto now is almost like a badge of honor. All right, it's almost like, hey, you got this that you're associated with, and yeah, that's maybe parts of it that, and this is for the outsiders looking in, right? Maybe there's not parts of it that I might not necessarily want, like not really being able to live in like conditions that's not really equal to suburbs. I would want to ride in a used car, because out here where I stay at, we all got, if we got a used car, they're only 3 years younger, 3 years older and younger, or mom, dad's leasing. I wouldn't want to live in a family where the men are not present, or the men are pushed out of the house. or I don't know who my dad is because he's in prison, or or I'm at risk of being pulled over, at risk of going to jail, at risk of getting a terrible education because I have to. I'm limited on what school I can go to, and although the school might be offering this, maybe the kids are a bad influence, or if the or maybe the kids are great in this school, and maybe the teachers suck because it's public education. You never know what you're gonna get. So all these things, right? But then they tune in and say, well, but I do like the other cool aspects of the ghetto. Like I love the swagger. I love the other things that the the, the ghetto gives us. It's what's really crazy though. When we think about our ancestors, what they were really fighting for was fighting for a, a, a better way for us to live. Uh, they wanted us to live better, okay? And when you look at the ghetto and then you try to compare it to what the ancestors envisioned, they envisioned that, and this is what this seemed like what maybe Dr. Martin Luther King was selling, and maybe you can comment and maybe tell me if I'm wrong or not. Being a part of this quote unquote American dream, where you can own your house, you can go to college, where you can be able to ride in a nice vehicle and not feeling like it's about to put you in a whole lot of debt, where you can be able to take your family on vacations and all of this other great stuff that the so-called American dream is sold to us on. And this is what our ancestors was thinking, like, okay, yeah, let's get equal rights, let's fight for equality. But it wasn't just about being able to sit on a bus. It wasn't about being able to drink from a water fountain. And when we look at what Dr. King really wanted, and what a lot of the other people, that were fighting alongside him and that were buying into he was one of many other leaders. Let's remember that, yes, he's the one that we illuminate, and we rightfully so should be putting a lot of these strong civil rights leaders up on a pedestal as much as we do Dr. King, because there was a lot of other people who, man, went just as worse but able to achieve just as much as Dr. King. So, right? Equality, opportunity, being able to tap into that opportunity, and we look at how our youth are living. We look at my generation and how they are struggling, and struggle can mean anything. Okay, it's for some it might not be the money part. Maybe you're struggling trying to figure it out as a parent. Maybe you're struggling either trying to get the credit together. Maybe you got the money, but the credit is screwed up. Okay, maybe you are struggling because like you are dealing with like a criminal background, and you want to be able to access jobs and you can't access a job, or you finally land a job and then you got to go through all of this unnecessary oppressing things that you start thinking to yourself like, man, I wonder if I wasn't who I was, would it be this way? You start wondering, you start doubting that we actually have opportunity as Black Americans in this country. Because you look at some of the things that limit you, or some of the things that block you, some of the things restrict you. Okay. And then you wonder, like, do I truly have options? Is this my only option? Now for some can rise above that and still take it back and look back and continue to move forward and say, hey, I'm still grateful for what the ancestors did for me, and what I do have available to me in this country, and I'm going to continue to do what I have to do. But for some, that's not as easy. They will allow the generation of trauma, because, like, when you think about the skin color here, it's a history of trauma that continues to sit somewhere deep in the subconscious. It's somewhere imprinted on the DNA that's is sometimes surfaced by something that triggers a memory of what the ancestor went through, and multiplied by just the crap you got to deal with. And for that reason, this is why we got a lot of hurt people, especially in the hood. A lot of hurt people, a lot of trauma on top of trauma. And what I have found is we are moving further away from being able to try to assimilate in this culture. We're constantly trying to find ways for those who are triggered, by this trauma that's imprinted on the DNA, and then again, you multiply it by all of the other things that causes PTSD and mental illness that's undiagnosed, like seeing your friend killed in the street, or and then or there's poverty all around you, and it makes it very hard for if we allow ourselves to take ourselves down, to understand and be compassionate to why some people feel they have to take these other unhealthy options in life. And we can easily say, well, man, let's just help them. Let's just help them. But that's blanket to the problem. And we can continue to do this. This is why the biggest hypocrites aren't in the hood. The biggest hypocrites is those who have the ability, but they don't have the patience. They don't have the patience. They don't have the same compassion, the same commitment and due diligence and urgency that our ancestors have. Okay, we got Black people who are in these leadership positions, and I hate saying leadership positions because there's no leaders no more. We got Black people in mayor seats. We got Black people in governor seats now. We got Black people in plenty Black aldermen. So I mean, you can across this country, there's plenty of Black aldermen. We got Black entertainers that are billionaires, and it's quite obvious that a fool will be stupid enough to think that, like, you can assess the problem with a blanket solution. without actually going and talk to the people, without actually going to do what our ancestors did. When we think about the original Black Party, and then we compare it to this new Black Party, total joke. Why they need to rebrand themselves? Call you something else. You're not the Black Party. You'll never be. Never be. And then you compare the old NAACP to the new NAACP. Joke. Drop the name, rebrand. And you look at Martin's supposed right-hand man, Jesse. Joke. Get rid of him. Or just wait for him to die. But it doesn't take back to the fact that he did put his body on the line, during the era. But like now, who is he now? Who is Al Sharpton now? But the bigger question is why do we have a generation that has came behind them, were able to rise above the ropes, get into these certain positions, and some of them came from where the majority of all of the hurt, the trauma, and the pain is happening in so-called good old hood. And it's like they have no memory of it. They try. Can you fault them for personal achievement, for personal growth, and then comparing themselves afterwards and saying, well, I'm not like that. But that's the problem now. We have a lot of other people that's not like you, that needs to be like you. But if we need to get rid of some of those other ways that like you have adopted, some of this corrupt ways that you have adopted, some of these ways of this white supremacy system that you have adopted, my friend. And these jokers know what I'm talking about, right? We need to get off this plantation as a whole. And yes, we want to continue to push personal achievement, personal growth. But as we are rising, as we are learning, let's not forget to look to our left or to our right and see who we're leaving behind, and maybe wonder if like we can drop some jewels on like what's working for us. Because like we can't depend on who's so-called at the top. That model, it was working at one point, but because we got so many people who's easily sold on power, greed, and corruption, and the need for money, and the money to like, for what? But to impress someone? So we got people storing up money to impress people. Storing up money to they're not even leaving it for the kids. Most of these people who's corrupting their way, scamming their way towards bigger money. And you might look at me and say, "Hey, Marcus, you're being tough on these guys. Why you got that mindset?" Well, they haven't showed us nothing different, and we keep on idolizing them, keep on giving the decisions over to them, when we as a people simply have to just start turning on a different part of our brain and allowing that to work with the creativity that's already within us. Creative people we are. Yes, we are. So, how can I wrap this up? Are the ancestors happy with the ghetto and the hypocrites? They're happy. They're not happy with the ghetto. They're not disappointed, I would say, in a lot of people in the ghetto, because it's not everybody. We know some people are callous. We know some people, if they were willing to be open to the help and are not so prideful and actually listen to those who like climbing the ladder. I'm talking about regular people, even like myself, that's willing to like share some wisdom, and instead of taking the wisdom and the knowledge and try to finesse, like you're trying to finesse wisdom and knowledge out of somebody. You don't have to do that. Wisdom and knowledge should come free, okay? And if we are all of a same type of people, which we are, regardless of race, anyways, we all of the same type of people. Especially if aliens came down, what are we gonna do? What if aliens came down and started attacking us? What are we gonna do? Are we gonna start choosing sides then, or it's not gonna matter? I mean, I think that was another point that MLK was making. He was like, hey, we need you to get along with us. We willing to get along with y'all. Get along with us, because like we all are one people. One day we will need each other, and that point start coming across in the military. At least sometimes it comes across. Like, I mean, there's still issue in the military. In the military too, I can talk about. I can go all day, and all day on this podcast, just naming crazy examples. But are the answers happy with the ghetto and hypocrites? So the hypocrites being, again, is just those who continue to spill, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. Like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. We're going to do this, we're going to do this. You should do this, you should do this, you should do this. But not doing it in their character. They're not doing it behind closed doors, because they're doing things to screw you over, screw the entire people over, finessing the people. Okay, they are doing it. They professional scammers. Okay, con people. Okay, they too smart that they lack the commonality that are among. I can call us commoners. So like, but again, they need help too, because a lot of them got some narcissistic tendencies. This is why they cannot drop their pride. This is why they cannot run away from the greed and come down and actually come and sit next to you and say like, hey, I'm not trying to criticize you or nothing like that, but maybe maybe you can do this, this way. This is what helped for me, and let's do it. Let's do it together. But instead, they want you to come run through the red tape and the hoops, and they putting more red tape, more hoops on you. And, as we find ways to advance and make things better, they co-sign on laws and other regulations that further push us down and put us backwards, or put us right where they want us to, making it very hard to move up. It's very easy to move down. You ever notice that? It's very easy to spend all your money, then you realize that, like, damn, I'm broke into next paycheck, or I'm broke into next month. or you lose a job and you just, that's it. it's like it's the end. It's like, man, I'm now waiting on unemployment. I'm waiting on something. I'm waiting on somebody to help me. They make it so hard. Even as a small business owner, you got to deal with like things that some of these larger corporations don't have to deal with. It's not equality. Doesn't sound like equality to me. It doesn't sound like that's what MLK was shooting for, like Martin Luther King was shooting for. Okay, so the wealth. I like this. Our friend watching here, he says, 1,000,000 steps to the top and 1 slip to the bottom. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. You right on target right there, man. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. We got. It's horrible, man. You have to be consistent. You have to be willing to dig through the trenches, and then once you dig through the trenches and come out of the trenches, run through the mine, the field mines, and then once you get to the gate, jump the gate, just to find at least 1 or 2 people who can give you the answer to something. Okay, and it shouldn't have to be like this. I mean, and then I know I talk a lot and I push a lot about mental health. If anyone has heard me talk before, but I'm finding out that even mental health, trying to get access to mental health or trying to get somebody to hear you vent and not be criticized, or feel like if you tell somebody something that you won't get criminalized, for telling them, hey, I did this, I might end up doing this, and it might lead to this. What should I do? And then you tell them, and you got to knock at your door. Somebody knocking at your door, and with a warrant. You're like, what? Stuff like that happens. So we it's going to take common folks like us to realize our issues and talk to each other and ask each other what our issues is and say, okay, all right, maybe I know something that can help you with that, and if we can't find something, like maybe let's figure out how we can create something. Maybe we can take it to somebody who can put it into action, like maybe or maybe we all can get together and do that, put it into action. Because I know for a fact, like 6 years ago now, almost going on 7, I was looking all over the place for a place to interview, and to promote my book. Like, it seemed like nobody was trying to hear me. I said, like, what is this? What is this? Like, why is it so easy, for people who write about BS to get interviews on radio shows and all type of stuff, and then I have a very serious book that can help people, and I can't get an interview. I said, screw that. You know what? I'm going to do it myself. So there's some things you can do yourself. There's some things that may take a team. There's some things that may take a professional, but a trusted professional, okay? A trusted professional. Remember that, a trusted professional. Okay, not just any professional, trusted professional. And sometimes that might not mean cheap. If you, and what I'm realizing more and more, and I'm hating this. The older I get, this is like, if you really, really want it, be patient, save up for it, and get it. And people like, man, I want it now, though. You got to get it now. That's the problem. When we look at the civil rights movement, they didn't get what they wanted right away. Some things just now coming. I mean, it's a damn shame, but we in a marathon. this whole life we is in is a marathon. Nipsey said it best. Shout out Nipsey Hussle. We in a marathon. Okay. If you still try to run your 100-meter dash and stuff, like you ain't gonna be fast forever. At some point you're going to have to slow down and realize, like, man, I need a moment to think. Maybe it's good that it ain't coming now. So shout out again to Molly. Molly, he says, Molly, don't shoot him. He says 100, bro, for sure. Yeah. So shout out to everybody who watched and listened today. Make sure you check out the Black Commentary podcast. This is one of 4 shows that I host. We got the Kinetic PE Mix show coming back with another new episode tomorrow, and also we got the music top 20 music weekly picks coming on this weekend, and then the Transform You Live show, my top show. I'm gonna hit you with a new episode probably tomorrow, and we'll give you Beyond the Natural on Thursday. So check out all those and much more. Find more information by going to transformuradio.com, transform the letter U radio.com. That's where you can find out like more about the network and all the different podcasts that we offer, not just the 4 that I host, but all of the podcasts is there. And our radio is up and rolling with music. As soon as you stop there, just press the play button, you'll be able to hear music around the clock. So that's all I got for you today. Thanks for rocking with me, chilling with me. Until next time, many blessings, peace, and lots of love. Stay black, y'all.
The theory of what's happening with the black family, black wealth, and the fear of a black man is the Black American experience that we truly look at, plagued by traumatic history and countless chances of accountability from all parties involved. Join us, and let's get in tune with the Transform You Black Commentary Show with your host, Marcus Art. Now here's your host,